Hey everyone, you know that feeling when you're like, is my kid like developing okay?
Oh, yeah,
We see you parents. We are right there with you.
definitely.
And that's why we decided to do this deep dive. It's all based on this really cool parenting blog that we found
Hmm.
that talks about these red flags during the pre-operational stage.
Yeah. PZ.
Oh, POZ. Yeah.
Yeah.
Always a fun one.
So, you want to give us a quick little recap of what exactly the pre-operational stage is all about? I mean, we're talking about kids like between 2 and 7-ish, right?
Right. Yeah. So this is the stage where, I mean, I'm sure you're seeing it already. They're just like little sponges.
Oh, yeah.
Their imagination is just like exploding. They're using so much language.
Yeah.
And they're starting to understand symbols and things like that. But logical thinking, not quite there yet.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it's this really cool phase, but it can be, as I'm sure you know, pretty baffling sometimes
Oh, yeah.
for parents.
So this blog that we're looking at today really zeroes in on these red flags. These are basically signs that something might be a little bit off with your kid's development. And, it might be worth, like, checking out.
Right.
Now, of course, we want to emphasize that every kid is different.
Of course.
They develop at their own pace.
Right.
So a red flag isn't a reason to, like, totally freak out.
Yeah, for sure.
It's just, something to keep an eye on.
Little heads up.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's jump right into those red flags then.
Okay, let's do it.
What are some things that parents should be looking out for, especially when it comes to language? Because, kids this age, they're talking up a storm.
Yeah, they're talking a lot, but are they making sense?
Right.
That's the question. So, like, if your kid is 4, let's say, and they're still struggling to put together those really basic sentences like, I want juice. Or if they're having a really hard time following, like, a 2-step direction.
Right.
Like, go get your shoes and bring them to me. That might be a signal that something's up.
Okay, so simple sentences, 2-step directions.
Got it.
Now, what about, like, the imagination part of this stage?
Okay.
Because my kid is constantly living in this, like, fantasy world.
Oh, I know the feeling.
But this blog mentioned a lack of pretend play as a concern. So how does that fit in?
So pretend play is, like, huge for this age group.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just cute. It's a sign that their brains are, like, really starting to make those connections. Like, they're understanding that a banana can be a phone.
Right.
Or a box can be a spaceship.
Exactly.
So around, like, 3.5 to 4 years old, if you're not seeing any signs of that pretend play, it's probably worth, looking into it a little bit further.
So it's not just about, like, whether or not they put on a show for us.
Right, exactly.
It's about how their brains are, like, developing behind the scenes.
Yeah, totally.
And this stage is also, like, they're famous for being rigid.
Oh, tell me about it.
My son used to have a meltdown if we even changed, like, the bedtime routine by a minute.
Totally. Like my daughter, she wouldn't let me put her pajamas on in the wrong order.
Oh, my gosh, yes.
It had to be the exact same way every single night.
So, like, when does that kind of rigidity become something to actually be concerned about?
Yeah, I mean, some rigidity is totally normal. All kids go through that.
Right, of course.
But if, your kid is having these, like, constant meltdowns over tiny little changes,
Yeah.
and it doesn't seem like it's getting any better over time,
Yeah.
that's probably a good thing to keep an eye on.
Okay, so it's kind of like we need to trust our parental instincts.
Yeah.
We know our kids best.
Exactly.
But sometimes it's helpful to have those, like, concrete things to watch out for.
Exactly.
Okay, so what else? What other red flags are on the list?
Okay, so another thing the blog talked about was social interaction.
Okay.
So, like, if your kid is 4 and they just, like, consistently show zero interest in playing with other kids, like even just parallel play where they're kind of doing their own thing but in the same room as other kids, if they're not even acknowledging the other kids are there, that's something to, like, watch.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then, of course, there's regression. Like, if they lose skills that they already had,
Right.
like if they suddenly stop talking or go back to, like, baby talk,
Yeah.
that's a big one.
That's definitely a sign to, like, get some professional help.
Exactly.
Okay, so it sounds like these red flags are really important to keep in mind. Just, for all parents out there.
Yeah.
It's about being informed and knowing when to, ask for help.
Totally. It's all about, like, empowering yourself with information so you can best support your kid.
Absolutely.
The more we understand about this stuff,
Yeah.
the better equipped we are to help our kids thrive.
For sure. For sure. Okay. Okay, so we've talked about those, like, initial red flags.
Right.
Those things that might make you go like, maybe I should look into this a little bit more.
Yeah.
But the blog also mentioned, like, some more serious signs. That might mean it's time to actually, talk to your pediatrician or a specialist or something like that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we're not trying to scare anyone here.
Of course.
But sometimes it's like, you have that feeling as a parent, but you're just like, is this really something, or am I just overreacting?
Exactly.
And that's when it's like, okay, maybe it's time to get like a professional opinion.
Right, yeah. Get some backup.
Exactly.
So let's talk about those signs then. Like, what are some things that fall into that category?
Okay, so speech is a big one. Like, if your kid is 5
Okay.
and strangers still can't really understand what they're saying,
Right.
that's definitely something to talk to your doctor about.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's not just about, like, pronunciation. It's about, like, the content of their speech, too.
Right.
Like, are they asking why questions all the time?
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, because if a 5-year-old isn't, like, constantly asking why,
Yeah.
that could be a sign that something's not quite right.
You know what? I never thought about that. Like, the absence of why questions.
Right.
But it makes sense.
Yeah, they should be driving us crazy with whys.
Totally. At that age, their brains are like little sponges, right?
Exactly. They want to know everything.
Okay, and speaking of things that drive us crazy, let's go back to play for a minute.
Okay, yeah.
We talked about pretend play.
Right.
But the blog mentioned some other play-related concerns, too.
Yeah.
So, like, what else are we looking for there?
Okay, so one thing is, like, if their play is super repetitive and there's not really any imagination involved.
Okay.
So, like, if they're just lining up toys over and over again or spinning the wheels of a car, but they're not, like, creating any kind of story around it.
It's like their play isn't evolving.
Yeah, exactly. It's stuck in this loop.
Okay. And then what about interacting with other kids?
Yeah, so if they're just completely ignoring other kids during play dates, that can be a sign that something's up with their social development.
So it's not just about whether or not they're playing with other kids.
Right.
It's how they're playing around other kids.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay. What about just, like, general, like, cognitive stuff?
Yeah, so, like, by 4 years old,
Okay.
they should be able to grasp, pretty basic concepts, like big versus small, different versus same, or simple categories.
Okay.
If they're struggling with that stuff, that's another thing to pay attention to.
Right. It's like they're missing some of the foundational pieces.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And then, of course, there's the emotional roller coaster
Oh, yeah, the tantrums.
of this stage.
Yeah.
Tantrums are just like a given, right?
Oh, for sure.
But, like, when does it become something to actually worry about?
Right. So if those tantrums are happening all the time,
Yeah.
and they're, like, super intense, and they last forever,
Yeah.
and nothing you do seems to help,
Right.
that might be a sign to talk to your doctor.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, I remember those days.
It's tough.
Like, I felt like my son was just in this, like, vortex of emotion.
Yeah.
And I couldn't pull him out.
It's exhausting for everyone.
Totally. Okay. And I think the blog also mentioned unusual sensory reactions.
Right.
Can you explain what that means?
So that's basically, like, if they're super sensitive to certain textures or sounds, or if they're not interested in exploring new sensory experiences.
Okay.
Like, for example, maybe they refuse to wear certain clothes because of the way they feel.
Right.
Or they won't do messy play.
Yeah. Got
So
it.
it's not just about being ticky.
Yeah.
It's like their sensory system is on overdrive.
Yeah. Okay. I think I understand.
And it's preventing them from, like, fully engaging with the world.
Right. Okay. So we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
From those, like, initial red flags to these more, specific signs. I feel like we've got a pretty good toolkit now
Yeah.
for, like, observing our kids' development.
Absolutely.
So for all the parents listening out there, what's, like, the most important thing to remember?
I think the biggest thing is just trust your gut.
Yeah.
You know your child best.
Mm-hmm.
If something feels off, don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah.
Talk to your pediatrician, talk to other parents.
Right.
You're not alone in this.
Yeah. So important.
Like, getting support from other people who are going through the same thing
Yeah.
can make a huge difference.
Absolutely. And you know what? The blog also had some really practical tips
It did.
for, like, okay, I have this concern. What do I actually do?
Yeah.
So what are some of those first steps? Like, what are the actual steps to take?
So the first thing is, like, just start paying attention and maybe write some stuff down. Like, keep a little journal or just notes on your phone about what you're seeing
Okay.
with, like, specific examples and when it happened.
Yeah.
That can really help you see if there's a pattern.
Right.
And it's really helpful info for your doctor, too.
It's like you become a detective.
Yeah. Exactly. You're gathering evidence.
for your kids to develop.
Exactly. And don't forget to talk to other people who spend time with your kid, too.
Yeah.
Like teachers, caregivers, grandparents.
Right.
They might have noticed things that you haven't.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And their perspective can be really helpful.
It really does take a village.
It totally does. And of course, your pediatrician is like the head of the village.
Mm-hmm.
They can do screenings for things like autism, ADHD, speech delays.
Mm-hmm.
And if they think your kid needs to see a specialist, they can refer you.
Okay, so talk to other adults, talk to the pediatrician.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's worth mentioning early intervention services, too.
Oh, absolutely. Those can be a game changer.
Yeah.
In a lot of places, you can get free evaluations for kids under 5.
Okay.
So if you're worried about anything, it's definitely worth looking into.
So for everyone listening out there, like, what's the big takeaway from all of this? I know talking about these red flags can be a little,
Yeah, a little scary.
Yeah. It could be kind of scary, but I hope this deep dive has been more empowering than anything.
Yeah, me too.
Like, you're not alone in this.
Exactly. Parenting is hard.
It is.
And you're going to have moments where you're like, what am I doing?
Oh.
But the more you know about this stuff,
Mm-hmm.
the better equipped you are to handle those moments.
Yeah, for sure. And we've talked about a lot today.
We have.
But I think the most important thing to remember is that every kid is different.
Totally.
They develop at their own pace.
Mm-hmm.
So trust your instincts.
Yes.
Observe your child closely. And don't be afraid to ask for help if you need it.
I love that. Asking for help is not a sign of weakness.
Yeah.
It means you're doing everything you can to support your kid.
And it means you're a good parent.
Exactly. So give yourself a pat on the back.
We've got this, parents.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we wrap up, I want to leave everyone with something to think about.
Okay.
As you're watching your kid go through this amazing stage,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
what are some of the unique strengths that you see in them?
Yeah. What are they really good at?
Yeah, and what are some of their challenges?
Right.
And how can you, help them on their individual journey in a way that really celebrates who they are?
That's a great question.
Thanks. It's all about, embracing the mess.
Yes.
Celebrating the milestones.
Totally.
And cherishing those, little moments.
Absolutely. The stage is so full of wonder.
It really is.
So just enjoy it.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah, this was fun.
We'll be back next time with another awesome topic to help you navigate the wonderful world of parenting.
Yes, we will.
Until then,